In today's video, I'm going to give you an overview of the FloZF software and some of the other software that's on the computer. In addition to FloZF, we also have CoolTerm, which is a terminal emulation program and is used sometimes in diagnostics. We also have an icon for Device Manager. Device Manager allows you to have a look at what COM ports are used by FloZF, and those are listed under Ports Common LPT. There are 3 COM ports that we're using. In this case it's COM ports 3, 4 and 5, and they're being used for the photon counter, the mini SIA and the multi-sampler. When you start up FloZF, you'll get an application with 3 panels on it. In the first panel, we do various setups. This panel derives devices from the available device types and assigns them to COM ports, and does certain configuration options. By clicking on any of the devices in this panel, you get a manual control for that device, and by clicking on the various buttons you can manually control that device. Aspirate, dispense, or slew. Slew means pump continuously, and it'll pump continuously until you press the stop button. It's also handy to have a number of these manual controls up at any one time, and so if you open up the panels where you want them and place them on the screen, and then go to the view menu option and record that view, it will position those, it will record the position of those panels. I've done that already, and so when I display instrument view, I get all the panels distributed around the screen as I want them. You shouldn't have to make any changes to this page because we've already configured all the devices. The Develop panel is the one where you set up sequences to do the analysis that you want to do. Those sequences are made up of steps that are drawn from the Resource Steps window, and they build up subsequences. Those subsequences can then be saved to the Resource Sequences window, and then build up those sequences into the sequence that you actually want to do. You'll see that in the Resource Steps window are all the devices from the Setup panel, plus 3 extra ones, System, Excel and Data. And those, each of them contains steps that are used in a sequence. In the Resource Sequences steps, there are a number of sequences that I've given, and they consist of sequences and subsequences, and in these subsequences are specific steps that have been drawn up from the Resource Steps page. The sequences that I've supplied are a develop sequence, a measure sequence, an optimize sequence, a shutdown sequence and a startup sequence. The develop sequence is used to just do single measurements as you develop your method. The measure sequence is a little bit more complicated, and we'll go into that in a separate video in more detail. And this allows us to do calibration and measure specific samples. The optimized sequence, which will also be the subject of another video, allows us to use Excel to design our experiment and carry out measurements of various settings. The shutdown sequence is used at the end of the day to empty all the lines of reagent and switch off the detector, and the startup does the opposite in the morning. It primes the lines and sets up the system for the day. When you drag any of these sequences across to the working sequences window, you can edit the working sequence in this window, which I'll show you a little later in a different video. And then you can play that sequence, which means execute it. You can stop it. You can record any changes you've made, or you can clear out the sequence. The lock icon prevents you from being able to make changes to the sequence that you don't want to make. The measure panel is where we do all of the data manipulation. On the measure panel, you have a results table which shows the results for each of the measurements that you have carried out. And then you have a series of data manipulation or visualization windows. The track window just allows you to have a look at any one of the measurements that you have done, and when you display them to, if you want to change the x-axis, the y-axis, just type it into the top number and it will change. It'll change that scaling. You can change the bottom one number as well. You can also have a look at all the peaks, all the results that have been measured to date, a histogram of them, and you can also splice these together with to give a pseudo chart recorder response. In the overlay panel, this gives you the opportunity to overlay various peaks. So if we wanted to take a closer look and compare these peaks, we just drag them over to this section here, and the peaks are overlaid for our consideration. Calibrate window allows you to set up calibration curves, concentrations and the results that come from them, and then a chart of a graph of what those look like. You can change the order of the regression fit that is carried out as well. The R-squared is given to you, and if you do replicates, error bars are shown. Map feature is not used in this instance. If you fit the system with a GPS, you can chart where results are taken on a map. The store window gives you the various folders where data are stored. While we're talking about those folders, all of the data for a particular project is listed in the documents FloZF projects folder, and particular project, if you open that up, it has the project file plus 3 folders. Sequences are all listed in this folder. There are a few miscellaneous files in this folder, and then the data folders that are shown in this store tab are given here as well, H202 and Optimize, as you see them there. There are a few additional files which we'll cover later. The variables page allows you to have a look at the value of any variable at any time. So if you type, I know that this is one of the variable names. Analyze port, and it has a value of 5 at the moment. You can also see the value of all of the variables by typing the word all, and that will give you the value of all the variables that have been used to date.